Hey, what's up, CF students? I feel like a question that a lot of people are asking right now is where is God? Where is God when all of this suffering is going on around the world, right? And I think that it's a very reasonable question that a lot of people ask, including people who wrote the Bible asked, where's God when terrible things are happening in this world, right? I think that on one hand, people can go to this one extreme where people are thinking, well, God must not exist because if all of this bad stuff is happening around me right now, why would he ever let that happen? Right? Then on the other hand, there's the other extreme of, well, okay, so if God does exist and he is letting all of this bad stuff happen, then either God must really not be all that good, he's probably even cruel, or God must not be powerful enough to do anything about it. Now, I think that both of those extremes are not only wrong, but I think that they completely miss the biblical view of where God is in relation to human suffering. There's a very famous passage, especially that gets used around Easter time, which we're coming up on here pretty soon. And that's Isaiah chapter 53. The title of it is, the prophecy of the suffering servant. And in Isaiah 53, it says this, and it's describing Jesus going to the cross. And this is what it says. He had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Like one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him in low esteem. Surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, yet we considered him punished by God, stricken by him and afflicted. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. So what we have here is an image of God who comes to dwell with mankind. But mankind doesn't want anything to do with him, and so he's subjected to all sorts of suffering and ultimately death. Now, notice what this is saying here. It says, surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering. So when Jesus went to the cross, not only was he bearing our sin and becoming our sin and killing that on the cross, Jesus is now taking on all of the pain and the suffering of this world in this moment and putting that on the cross too. So it's not just about sin and guilt, it's also about pain and suffering. And Jesus is taking the world's pain, all past, present, and future of our sufferings, and putting that on himself, taking that into himself when he goes to the cross. And he's doing this because he's becoming the hope that we have at the end of the Bible in Revelation 21. The end of the Bible, we have this beautiful image of the new heavens and new earth, and heaven and earth become one, and Jesus is sitting on the throne. And here's what he says in Revelation 21. He says, he will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, nor mourning, nor crying, nor pain, for the old order of things has passed away. So this is like some huge hope that we have because of what Jesus has done for us, because Jesus came to dwell with us and took on our pain and our suffering so that it could be destroyed, right? So that we would have hope of the day when there is no more pain and no more suffering. And what we have here is not, an image of God who is removed from the stuff that we're dealing with. But what we have here is an image of a God who would not abandon his children to suffer and die alone, but instead chose to enter in to our realm, to our existence, and share in our sufferings with us to give us hope that he's going to heal it, that he's going to bring it to completion, that there's hope in him. Now, I know that some of this might seem a bit like an Easter lesson, but I want to get really personal with you guys for a few minutes. See, when I grew up in church, I had this image of God that I would always see on paintings and in little handouts from Sunday school that was this painted picture of Jesus, or he was always depicted as like almost like a white guy with wavy hair with like blonde highlights and blue eyes and a neatly trimmed beard, and he was really beautiful looking, and he was always holding a lamb, and when I was going through periods in my life when I was dealing with deep suffering and really questioning God and being like, God, where are you when I'm going through this? Like, I'm over here suffering. God, why don't you seem to care? The image that I had of God in those moments was that image of Jesus as like this, completely perfect person with no blemishes on his face and perfect hair and all of this stuff. But it was when I read Isaiah 53 that changed how I was seeing God in my head. No longer was it like this face that was, completely perfect looking, but instead it was the face that was scarred and bruised and bloody from the sufferings that he went through, that he took upon himself, that I was going through. And then, so in that moment, how I was viewing God was shifting because of what I was reading in Isaiah 53. And all of the sudden, I had hope because I knew that I wasn't alone and that God himself was dealing with the suffering that I was. Some of y'all may know, but I'm the singer of a Christian metal band called Crucify the Flesh. And we just recently released a song called Silence. And in Silence, I'm literally screaming about this process that I'm going through of questioning God and dealing with faith and doubt and where is God when I'm suffering, right? And in the song, there's a verse where I'm screaming the words, "The God that I grew up with, the face painted on church walls, was different than the one whose face was despised and rejected by all. But the face that I see now reveals love in a different way. As his people dwell in suffering, he enters in to stay." See, Isaiah 53 changed how I viewed God. No longer did I see God as this person who was removed from my suffering and was too beautiful for my brokenness, right? But instead I saw God as the God who wouldn't abandon me, as the God who shared in my pain and in my hurt, as the God who cared about me and loved me enough to go to the cross and bear my suffering and my pain. And guys, that healed so much in my spirit as I was dealing with hurt and brokenness and suffering. And so my encouragement for you guys is to be reading Isaiah 53 for yourself. Go through it. Ask the tough questions. Let that inform your view of God and inform your view of how God is in relationship to our suffering, especially right now with where the world is at. But guys, ultimately read that and have hope. Because God has not abandoned us. He will not abandon us. He loves you. He loves me. He loves this world. And he's bringing about the completion and bringing about hope for us when we suffer. Guys, I love you. God loves you. Have a great day.